All right, everybody, we are live here on the Nightmare Press podcast, episode 16. Today, my guest is author Wes Blake. I met Wes at a Bullitt County Authors Fair out here where we live and was talking to him a bit about authoring and talking to him about his book. His book is called Pineville Trace. I have yet to read it, though I intend to. It seems pretty interesting, but it's a novella, correct?
It is, yeah. It's a novella. It's novella length. It's a novella in flash fiction. It's kind of a weird form. So, but yep, it's a novella, and the chapters are comprised of flash fiction stories.
I found that to be pretty interesting because it's sort of, I don't know if I would call that experimental style, but it almost kind of is an experimental structure, and I'm very much into that sort of thing. I appreciate different approaches. So I guess first of all, just tell us what the book's about.
Sure. So here's the cover. The cover art here is done by an artist and friend of mine in Louisville, Eric Rust, and I love I love his work there on the cover. But as you said, Jacob, and first of all, thanks for having me. Like you'd mentioned, we had a good conversation at the Bullitt County Authors Fair, and I appreciate you having me on Nightmare Press. It starts out. It's a novella. And so it tells a story about this character named Frank Russett. He's a former faith healer and a revival preacher, and he finds himself in a minimum security prison in eastern Kentucky on Pine Mountain. And he decides to walk away with a stray cat named Buffalo. And so they take off, and that's the gist of the story. As you had said, like you mentioned, Jacob, it's got a weird form. So I'm not sure how much the camera will pick up here, but look at the table of contents here. You can see like a short story collection or a poetry collection. Every chapter has a title, so it tells that overarching story, that chronological story, but yet each chapter is a standalone flash story of about 1,000 words or less that stand on their own and tell this overarching story. So that's kind of the gist of it.
So is it still like what happens with Frank? Is that still is pertinent to the rest of to all the chapters, or
Absolutely.
yeah?
Yep.
So
It's the whole book is his story, and he's a character that I've written about before. But yeah, but it's just an overarching story about Frank there.
yeah, I think that's really cool. It's like so they're not like this chapter ends here, so the next chapter necessarily picks up right after the first chapter. There's just different events. I
Yeah,
I enjoy that sort of layout. I think that's really interesting.
I do too. I was really interested in the flash fiction form because I read a book. And this speaks to what you just said, Jacob. I read a book by Christopher Chambers, and his book is called Delta 88, and it's a flash fiction collection. And like a lot of the great story collections, like Dubliners and like Gertie Norman in Kentucky, Kinfolks, there's a narrator and a character that appears in all the stories, and I love that flash fiction form, and I loved how it had this accumulation of meaning, and that's really one of the things that really inspired me to write in this form. And yeah, I agree with you. I like that, having those individual stories, but then also sometimes when they accumulate meaning, it's really nice.
Yep. So the faith healer, what kind of made you go that route?
So I started writing about this character, Frank Russett. He's a faith healer and a revival preacher, and I've been writing about him since 2014. Actually, just before this started, Jacob and I were chatting a little bit. I'm actually polishing the first novel about Frank, the faith healer that I started writing in 2014. And so, anyways, why did I start writing about that character? I knew a friend of mine, his really good friend of mine growing up. His great uncle was a faith healer of some renown, and I heard these firsthand stories of people in his family and people that knew him, and just it was so interesting to hear how he impacted people, and people felt that he was so genuine, and he really had a just one of these people that you really want to meet, that was a real one of a kind character. I've rarely heard anyone talk about people the way that people talked about him, but also there were fraud allegations as well, and so I just love that uncertainty and that complexity of who really is this person. And so that really was the inspiration for writing about a character like this. I wanted to write about a character like that was hard to know.
So yeah, you mentioned this kind of personal experience just by knowing, a friend who had the faith healer as a relative. One question I always like to ask people is the whole write what you know versus, trying to learn new experiences. Um, how important do you think writing what you know really plays into? And if someone's going to try to write about something new, they should probably, how should they go about getting experience for that?
That's a good question. And that adage, "Write what you know," it's out there for a reason. But sometimes I know as I've been writing over the years, sometimes it's hard to know, like, what does that really mean? Write what you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard sometimes. And like you said, sometimes you can research something to learn about it. But I think all writing is going to boil down to, you're going to have some element of experience or observation. You've experienced something, you've observed things, and then that plus imagination. So you put your own experience and your own observations, as you move through life, and you put those together with your imagination, and it kind of goes from there. But yeah, I like I went to Bluegrass Writer Studio at EKU, and they have this really cool summer residency where they partner with Disquiet literary program, which is a writers conference in Lisbon, Portugal, each summer. And so I went there as part of Bluegrass Writers Studio, and a speaker in 2014, when I first started writing about this character Frank in Pineville Trace, the one of the speakers, and I've been trying to track down, I've been talking to folks that were there trying to figure out who said it, and so one day I'll give them credit. But they said, write about what obsesses you. Write about what obsesses you. And for me, it was so instructive. And it guided me even more than write what you know. Write about what obsesses you kind of points you in a different direction. And that's really what led me to, in answer to your kind of add on to my answer from earlier, that's what kind of led me to write about a character like Frank Russet. And that's what led to me creating this character.
I think that write about what obsesses you is a really interesting. It takes that whole, like you said, it takes that whole write what you know, and it takes it a little bit further. Um, and that's kind of like what I'm usually trying to get to when I ask people that question, because there's always that argument of you're not what you write, or are you what you write? And I think it's a little bit of both. But
Mhm.
I mean, that's not to say if you write about, a serial killer, that doesn't mean you're a serial killer, right? But there's
Right.
something about serial killers that interests you, even if it's purely psychological and it's, not dangerous or anything. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that a lot of like what people write about, I think you almost kind of have to be obsessed with what you're writing about to an extent.
I agree. And yeah, and for folks listening, Jacob actually and I were just, Jacob's a writer. You're a writer as well. Jacob, you know this, but everyone listening may not know this. But we were just talking about kind of like the different drafts of novels that you have. You have so many different manuscripts, and man, if you're not obsessed with what you're writing about, it's going to be a pretty painful experience
Oh,
to
yeah,
revise and revise for years. And then,
right.
thankfully, I've done so many, interviews, podcast interviews, and just, print interviews and book events and in conversation events. And that, thank goodness, like I'm still excited to talk about this character, and I'm still excited to talk about this story and this book, Pineville Trace. because man, if it was something I was not obsessed with, it would be a terrible experience.
Certainly
Probably for readers too, right?
Yeah, and I think even the obsession can be like something you abhor. Like, I mean, let's say someone writes about domestic violence a lot, doesn't mean they approve of it. It means that they're very disgusted by it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, I feel like you mentioned, how you just said that if people aren't obsessed with it, it's going to be a painful experience, and that's why I wonder if like a lot of people say they hate editing. And I
Mhm.
mean, of course, like, right, we all kind of hate having to go back over because we want to get to the next thing. But it's like, do they really hate editing, or do they just want to get to the next thing, or do they hate it because maybe their heart wasn't really into what they were writing and they don't want to keep pouring over it?
Right. Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And that was my cat, Queek, which is short for Squeak. And speaking
Yeah,
of obsessions, I've always been obsessed with cats,
yeah,
so I can't shut them out. So that
right.
was Squeak saying hello.
Yeah,
Um,
that's all right.
but
We like
no,
having pets.
I totally agree. Like, I wonder if that is part of it. If you're editing and just you're not enjoying what you see or not involved in it, that could be part of it. There's Steve Almond. I don't know if folks listening are if you're not familiar with Steve Almond, he's a writer, literary fiction. I would probably say where he fits. He's got a book called Candy Freak that is. Are you familiar, Jacob? Have you?
No, I just
He,
called. Sorry.
no, you're fine. He anyways, it's this book about candy, and it kind of goes through this this history of candy and like these small factories in different parts of the country. Like, you would go to North Carolina and there'd be this specific type of candy that was like nothing else. And and then all of a sudden all the corporations bought them up. It's kind of a story about that, which is kind of a story about America and the modern
Yeah.
world in a lot of ways. But the interesting part, he wrote it because he was obsessed with candy, and when he really dug into it, he uncovered that he'd always been obsessed with candy, and it was kind of related to his depression, where he struggled with depression throughout his life, and it was something that was comfort for him. And so along the book, he goes to all these candy factories and interviews these people, but he also kind of goes through his own inner life and his own inner history. And he did there's like 5 things I've learned, or that some of these podcasts that will come up here and there, and he did one. I can't remember who does those, but he did one, and I went to it. He talked about that. He actually talked about the same idea about this idea of obsessions and how they can be a good writing tool. And he kind of talked about like the Moby Dick. There's a character that's obsessed with revenge and killing this well. And The Great Gatsby, there's you've got this character, Jay Gatsby, who's obsessed with this woman, Daisy. And so he talked about that. Back to your point, I love what you said, Jacob. You said it can be something you hate. And I recently came across it. Someone mentioned that I believe it may have been Ray Bradbury, of things that he loved and things that he hated, and he hated censorship.
Nope, I think you're breaking up a little there, Wes. Yeah, I think we lost contact with Wes here. Unfortunately, it was a good conversation too. So I guess until get this fixed or not, I I like to ask that question for those who maybe don't watch this show a whole, because I don't really know how many people actually watch me. But I asked that question because I think the answer is so different for everyone when you start asking about write what you know, write what you're, like you mentioned, write what you're obsessed with, and try adding them back. See if that works. Nope.
Hey,
There we go. Okay, we got it.
I'm back. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. What happened to us, Jacob?
I'm not sure. I don't know if there was just a mess up in the connection or what, but you just started kind of going in and out. So,
Yeah, sorry about that.
no, that's all right. It didn't happen. We had one lady was from some place that didn't have a great connection, and she ended up the show it ended up blacking her out like 2 or 3 times. So
Oh no.
yeah,
It
it
should
happened.
be it should be I've got pretty good Wi-Fi here. Oddly, I'm in Nonsuch, Kentucky in southern Woodford. I should not have good Wi-Fi, but we happen to be really close to the tower, so
No.
um, it's pretty good, pretty reliable. I don't know.
I think the
Yeah.
last thing you were talking about was Ray Bradbury hating censorship. That was the last thing
Yeah.
I
Yeah. So I kind of saw this as a writing prompt, and it's been on my mind lately. And I think that's how, if I'm remembering this correctly, he made a list of things he hated and things he loved, and he hated censorship, he hated book burning, and so that's what led him to writing for Fahrenheit 451. And so to your point, he was obsessed with it, but like he hated it. He wrote about something that he really disliked. So there was an energy there, which always makes it more interesting for the reader too. And there's an energy there like that.
I think so. I try to do both. Like if I don't just have
Mhm.
like just a weird idea, which a lot of my stuff is just weird anyway, because I have a lot
Mhm.
of strange thoughts. but
Sure.
but like if I'm writing about something and if it starts out from something that I really like, if that's part of it that I'm in, or at least just interested in a positive way, I try to throw stuff in there that I think is terrible too to give it a balance. Or if I
Yeah.
or vice versa, if I start thinking of something that was terrible that prompted the story, then I try to throw in better things.
Hmm.
I try to keep it balanced, and I think that's I think that makes for good storytelling, at least for me, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That kind of reminds me of they did a screening of Blue Velvet at the Kentucky Theater, in honor or in memory of David Lynch, and that a lot of his movies are that way, and I'm a huge fan of his work. But
Me too.
you've got this like pristine 1950s America, and like
Yeah.
these perfect lawns, and then you've got this horrible underbelly of just
Yeah, I absolutely love his work. The way his storytelling is. Mulholland Drive is possibly one of my it's definitely one of my all-time favorites. I don't know if it's my favorite movie, but it's pretty high up there.
Yeah, same. That's one of my favorites by anyone and by him as well. Did you? I was really sad I didn't catch it at the Kentucky when it was there. I just wasn't able to make it that day. That made me
Yeah.
very sad. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great.
Lost Highway, Blue Velvet, and Mulholland Drive. Those movies are just fantastic. I mean, I like Wild at Heart and a
Yeah,
couple of his other films. They're all good. Eraserhead.
yeah.
Uh, but just those three in particular, they're just so fantastic.
Yep, I love those. And so my wife and I were both kind of obsessed with like the whole Twin Peaks, series, the first
Oh
couple
yeah,
seasons and
yeah,
the movie and the new season. And we went out to Snoqualmie, Washington, and went and kind of did a Twin Peaks pilgrimage a couple years ago. That was pretty great.
that's awesome. So it kind of reminds me, like we're talking about being obsessed with things, whether you hate them or like them. So I think most authors would agree. At least I don't know. The writing is some sort of a catharsis, and whether it's just to make you feel better or to just purge a lot of. For me, it's a lot of stuff in my head. So
Mhm.
how? What about you? Do you find that your writing is cathartic? And
Sure. I think that, yeah, I agree with that. I wouldn't say that's not that that's the main purpose of why I write, but I think that it kind of forces you to mine your own subconscious in a lot of ways. And so I think, yeah, you kind of have to, because like we were talking about earlier, if you're mining your imagination and things that you're obsessed with, whether you like or dislike, you're doing a lot of mining of your own inner world, right?
yeah, and I think even if you set out to write something totally not about you, you're going to end up being, something totally not about anything you think about. If you're just like, oh, I think this would be a good idea to have this person do this. Eventually, I think like you said, you're going to start mining. Going to start
Mhm.
finding something therapeutic. And I don't know, I feel like walking away from a book after writing a book, I feel like it changes me a little bit, and I think that might be part of the enjoyment of the journey.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like how you put that. I agree. There's another thing I think that's really interesting about it. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. When you write a book, and I think this is one of the reasons I love writing books, and this would be the same for creating paintings, I would imagine, or architecture or albums or any work of art. There's the creative process. But for me, when you're writing a book, you or creating something, it's kind of like a time capsule for that period of your life. And so, like, for example, like Pineville Trace, I worked on this book from 2020, beginning of 2022, February 2022 through beginning of March, beginning of 2024. So a couple years. So it's kind of a time capsule for those years of my life. And it's just so interesting to kind of capture your experience that way.
Yeah, the I had a similar experience with the poetry book I released a few years ago called Man in the Shadowland. And looking back on that, like I see like that was 10 years worth of like just what was going on in my life, a lot of mental
Hmm.
health struggles and just everything that was going on. And I didn't even realize it then when I wrote it. So it's interesting when you look back at something like that and realize that it is kind of like you said, a time capsule. And I think that can create some great work. I'm not saying mine was great. I'm just saying like it can create some great work and authors who are more skilled than I. So, um,
Well, I think it's kind of, I mean, Pineville Trace was my fifth book. And so I just finished a second draft of my, it's actually right here, but this is my seventh book, I should say. They're not all novels, but I think it's like anything, Jacob. I kind of find myself like even going back and revising and kind of polishing this book I've been working on 11 years. It's like anything, the more you do it, the more skillful you get at it, and the more at least you learn your own process. And um, even reading this book aloud, a lot of
yeah,
at all these events and interviews, reading it aloud, then you go back to your other book. If there's some passage that you're not going to feel confident reading aloud, if there's a clunky sentence, like forget about it. It's got to
yeah,
change. It's got to get better. So, we just keep working at it, right?
yeah, it's ever evolving, certainly. Um, well, you talked about going out to a lot of author events and stuff, and one thing I don't get into as much with the conversations with people is the importance of author involvement in their work. I think a lot of I think a lot of authors understand that, and then there's some who just may struggle figuring out how to navigate that. Like for me, I struggle a lot with online stuff, but like going out and doing events and doing all stuff, I'm fine with it. So, how do you find important author involvement is in someone in their own work?
Yeah, no, that it's really important. So when I kind of my writing story, I'm 45, and when I was 19, I became an English major at UK, and I took a class with Gurney Norman, creative writing course, and that was really important for me. And so I've kind of been hooked on the writing thing since then. That would have been 2000, well, probably 2000 actually. So in the year 2000 or so. And so to your point, I studied under James Baker Hall and Gurney, and wrote stories and wrote stories. And then I kind of got into life throughout my 20s and didn't write as much as I wanted to, just because of, you have to, I was so busy figuring out all the other things I needed to do. I didn't make it a priority like I wanted to. And so, long story, I got into the MFA program at EKU, and then I did that from 2014 to 2016. And so I saw firsthand, being around other writers, being held accountable to produce writing. It was hugely important, and that's what helped me finish my first novel, Antenna, where Frank Russet first appeared. And so even since I finished that in 2016, I go to conferences. Matter of fact, I planned to go to AWP, but just life just didn't allow for it right now.
Yeah,
But but I go to conferences. I stay connected with Bluegrass Writer Studio at EKU. I try to at least go to several of their open mics whenever I can and go to their events. because it does matter. You have to keep yourself tethered to that. And I wish I would have done it more before I published my book, because once my book came out, I realized how hugely important it is. Like most book events don't have a huge turnout, beyond your first launch. That's just kind of, unless you're Stephen King, which not many of us are. There's only one of those.
And it just keeps going down and down as time goes on with authors. So.
Yeah. So it's just so important. Had I realized that before, I would have gone to more. I kind of regret not doing more in the past, but now that I know that now, I would just encourage anybody listening who wants to be a writer. Like, the Carnegie has a Books in Progress conference. If you're in Kentucky, that's coming up. It's open right now. That's been really helpful for me. Some of the authors that I've done events with and, have been there. Go to those events, get to know other writers, support them, write book reviews. Literary journals are hungry for book reviewers. So write a book review. You're really helping a writer out, and it's just good karma. Do interviews, publish interviews. Like, there all these ways that you can stay involved and help other writers. It kind of helps you stay in it. Like, one thing that I was thrilled. I don't know how well this is going to show up, but Lee Martin, I don't know is that the blurb there? Yeah, there at the very top. That's a blurb there by Lee Martin, the Pulitzer Prize finalist writer of The Bright Forever. And I love his work. And he came to Bluegrass Writer Studio, and I did an interview with Lee. And so that's how I kind of knew him and had a connection with him. So when I found out that Pineville Trace had won this book prize at Etchings Press at University of Indianapolis, I reached out to Lee and said, asked if he would be willing to write, to read and write a blurb for me. And he was so generous and did. And that was so helpful. And doing that for other people, that's in any way you can is just a good thing to do.
I agree. We're all in this boat together, right? So
yeah,
the more you can help each other, I definitely think it's a good, not just it's good karma, but I mean it's just good for the industry anyway. Like, we're already a shrinking industry as it is, So it's like you were mentioning, the book launches, the book turnouts, and like I've had conversations with people who talk about wanting to make a living writing, and it's like since 2000, authors published after 2010, the amount of them who actually make a living writing is just minuscule, And that's again not counting the Stephen Kings, the Dean Koontzes who were published before then, So I mean, so the more we can help each other, it's a labor of love. I think the more we can help each other, the better. And the more you can get out and be involved in promoting your own work, because when I started, with indie presses, and I was kind of like, I didn't know how to do that, and it was kind of like, well, people say, well, the press is supposed to do that, and it's kind of like, well, the reality of it is it's difficult to even navigate that. And now being a publisher, I realize the difficulty, and having been a self-published author. So yeah, we all got to be involved with doing it, because it's a hard road.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like, I'm really grateful to my publisher, Etchings Press. They're a small university press, and it's a contest. It was a contest. So, but I mean, really, the majority of the way contests work, the majority of the sales benefit the publisher. And I think that's great. Like, they were the first press to believe in my work enough to publish one of my books. I'd gotten stories and essays published, but this is my first book. So that's a leap of faith. And so if I can benefit them and help out a small university press, I feel like that's great. And like, even like, I love in any small minuscule way that little Wes Blake, the small press writer can help out, any local bookstores or small presses, or libraries. Libraries have been fantastic in this area. And anything I can do to kind of help them out and help the community out, it's just the thing to do. Oh, I'll tell you this. This got me excited about book reviews. I was reading this biography of Herman Melville, and so his first book that came out was reviewed by Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Oh
So I
yeah,
believe it's like the New York Times or something, but it was reviewed
yeah,
by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And so I read that and I thought, wow, I didn't realize that Nathaniel Hawthorne was writing book reviews. And
yeah.
then just the other day, I was reading about Dennis Johnson, one of my heroes, writing heroes, I should say. And I'm currently writing an essay on him right now for my newsletter, my next newsletter. But Robert Stone, another writer who I love, an American writer who's just fantastic. He wrote a really nice review of Dennis Johnson's book. And so when you dig into that a little bit, you realize that it's just the thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, Edgar Allan Poe, I think, was during his lifetime was known more for his literary criticisms and stuff than he was his own writing at the time. And
Really?
of course, you know, Stephen King, he was always blurbing other authors and mentioning them. And then
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, I think it's cool to see people do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just, and it's just it helps build a proper community. It helps build a proper, you know, gateway, and it's just the more you can help people get in, I think the better it is
Mhm.
for everything. Better it is for business and the art. So
Yeah.
one of the questions I was going to ask you already mostly covered just now, because I thought the way, you know, Pineville Trace came about being published was interesting, because a lot
Mhm.
of people have questions about should they enter contests, should they not. So
Mhm.
just tell us if there is a little more detail you can give on how you came about getting that published.
So I first of all, I would recommend it. I so to get to the beginning, my relationship with book contests, and so for folks listening that may be newer to this concept, like when we say this, we mean a book contest where you send in your whole manuscript for a full book and the winner is published. Like that's the kind of book prize we're talking about. But so Julie Hensley she actually has she's a fantastic writer and she was my thesis director and she teaches at EKU at the Bluegrass Writers Studio and she has a new book coming out. I think it's May 20th, sometime in May, and it's called Five Oaks and I've just started reading it. It's love it so far. So anyways, Julie Hensley, when I finished my MFA, she was generous enough to meet and kind of walked me through her process of how she sends books out to book prizes. And so one of her she's got this fantastic story cycle collection that was published by Ohio State University, and it was a book prize. And so I think it's fantastic. It's a little bit of legwork to figure out when the book prizes are. I'd recommend anybody listening who wants to learn about that, go to Poets and Writers. So I think it's pw.org is their website, but Poets and Writers, they have, there's no charges, information is free. New Pages is another one. But go there and they'll list all the book prizes, And so usually, like I said, they're tethered to a university. But I think it's fantastic. There usually is a fee. That's the catch. It's usually, maybe $25 or something like that. Sometimes they're free, but there's usually a fee. So pick the ones you want to do. But my book Antenna was a finalist for the University of New Orleans book prize. And that was really nice. And then Sundress Publications did an open reading prose contest, and Antenna was a semifinalist for that. So I've had some luck with it. Of course, my first book, Pineville Trace, was birthed into the world through a book prize there at University of Indianapolis's Etchings Press. I recommend it. I've even talked to a couple agents since, and that have said that it's a good way to get your first book out in the world. And if it gets some attention, there's a lot of folks that do get picked up by agents if that's the path you're looking at, or if that's a path you want. That's viable. Yeah, I think it's been great. I could talk forever. Like my editor has been fantastic. He gave me the freedom to choose, to have some say in the cover art. And so
It's a really cool cover too.
oh, thanks, man. That's all my friend Eric Rust, and also the staff at at Etchings Press as well. It's a student-run press, and so so actually the cover image was by Eric Rust, but the cover design was by Abby Bailey. And so Abby Bailey is a student there at the University of Indianapolis. I mean, she just did a fantastic job. But that's one thing you get with a book prize or a small press or a small university press. Even you get a little more say. If this was through Penguin Random House, they probably wouldn't. They probably would have had more control around those things. And I don't know. I like how it was nice having some say in it. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely from a creative freedom, artistic freedom standpoint. I've always found that smaller presses, it's better. They're more willing to work with you. I think also they just have more time to work with you. I mean, a lot of the bigger presses, they've built an established brand, and they've got so many people, and they pay so many people, so they kind of like, this is what we're going to do. This is our process, and you, the
Right.
author, are just going to take the book, and we need you to go do events and promote it and try to sell and make
Yeah.
money off of it. So I
Yeah.
get it. I mean, I can see where they're coming from, but it is nice to have that creative freedom.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree. And that's even if you look at it, like I'm a big music head. And so like if you look at if you look at like the 80s, like the music that REM was making in the 80s,
Yeah.
it was not mainstream. And I think that's such a good thing. And with a small press, you get a chance to not be pigeonholed into doing all the mainstream things, and I think that's a good thing. It's nice to have artwork that's out of time, and I feel like it's more authentic.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny you mentioned REM. That was my favorite band growing up for years. They
Oh,
were they were with IRS, and they had a lot of
yeah,
initially, and they had a lot of interesting bands. And of course, they went on to get signed on with Warner Brothers and become a
yeah,
pretty big band without truly ever selling out. So,
yeah,
so
yeah. They're amazing. I love them. But those early records are so good. And you're right. They did exactly what they wanted to do. You listen to them and they were not trying to fit their moment or meet their moment. They
no, they
weren't
never
like,
made traditional '80s music. That's for
mm-mm.
even for the college radio and alternative scene, they were still different.
Yep.
They kind of set the stage for what became popular alternative music in the '90s. I mean, if you listen
Yep.
to like Nirvana, they just sound like REM with like the fuzz box. They like the
Yeah.
lyrical style and even the chorus. I think REM were better musicians, but I mean, I still like Nirvana. But I mean, just
Yeah.
like yeah, just you see how that sets. We've kind of gone off on another topic, but
No, I mean it's relevant though because we're just
yeah,
talking about a different medium. But no, I agree. You've got like that's one cool thing because IRS records in the 80s. I agree with you. I don't think the 90s would have been what they were without bands in the 80s like REM doing what they wanted to do. And they couldn't if they would have jumped right on the biggest label, they couldn't have come out of the gate, making
no,
music like that. They would have been pressured to meet the moment. And so that's the same with books, really. So linking it back to your question, that's
yeah,
book prizes are mostly with small university presses, and that's one advantage. One disadvantage with if you find an agent, you have access to bigger distribution. Like they have sale, if
absolutely,
you
yeah,
get landed at one of the big five or the big four, you they have sales reps at every bookstore, and Kirkus will do a review and some of the bigger places will pick you up, whereas and I think this is kind of I could gripe about it for a while, but I think that the Kirkus, they won't really review a lot of small presses or a lot of small university presses unless you pay them to. And I think I get it. There's a lot of books out there, but I think that's a bit crazy because it's such a level of gatekeeping.
it is.
There's already gatekeeping. You can't, the big presses, the big four now, big five, they won't accept a book except through an agent. So
Yeah,
that's one gate. That's one gatekeeping. And then, with a small university press, some of the big places like Kirkus won't hardly review them, you know, so it's just kind of like a double gatekeeping thing. That's the only thing I would say, that when you do a small university press, you really have to be your own agent for the work. Like, you have to be your own publicist and your own, you have to really do the distribution legwork on your own.
Right. Yeah, and that's the big, yeah, like you said, that's the big advantage of the Big Five press.
Yeah,
Which Big Four, well, they would have been Big Four if they wouldn't have gotten, the last merger wouldn't have gotten broken up by the
that's
courts.
true.
But I mean, they're
That's
still essentially Big Four. But I
yeah.
mean, yeah, they have the big distribution. They can take the hit because it's like, if
Mhm.
it's tougher for smaller presses because a return could cost them thousands of dollars, and that'll sink
Yep.
most small presses. Um,
Right.
and even some of the bigger, and I'm not going to name any, but even some of the bigger small presses, independent presses that have been around for decades, are struggling now. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a whole different game, and it's like adapt, just like they say in biology, adapt, move, or die, and that's just what kind of everybody's going to have to figure out.
Yeah.
So yeah, the gatekeeping at the bigger level is huge, and I know a lot of people get mad about it, and I get frustrated with it. But I mean, at the same time, like I said a minute ago, I can understand why it exists.
Yeah.
Um, I don't necessarily. I mean, there is a sense of snobbery a lot of these people have about self-published and independent published. I don't think that's the main reason. I don't think that's at the heart of it. I think it's just all about time and money
Yeah.
investments. They got to have a good ROI, or it's just not going to be worth their
Yeah.
trouble. So that's why we're all out here trying to do what we're doing. And self-publishing and indie presses are becoming a lot more viable and a lot more popular
Yep.
because it's kind of like content on YouTube. A lot of people who maybe can't get on with like a music company or a movie company, they can do YouTube or these other platforms or whatever and just have their own shows. It's just there's the ability for all of us to kind of create our own stuff, even if we don't have the huge distribution, you know.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. I love what you said there. I actually heard this quote today. This Charles Darwin quote, and Charles Darwin said, "It's not the strongest or the most intelligent that survive. It's those most responsive to change."
yeah,
And so that's the reality. There's pros and cons, and with the small press, with a small university press, you get a lot of freedom, and just the catch is that you need to do more of the work to connect your work with readers. And I actually enjoy that part of it. Like
yeah, it's
I
enjoyable.
yeah, I believe in this book, and I'm happy to to bring it to the attention of readers. And so, yeah, did you hear Tin House just got recently bought out? That was kind of
No,
sad.
I didn't hear
Um,
that.
Speaking of small presses, yeah, I can't remember who picked them up, but it's like if a small press like has enough success, they get, and hopefully they'll remain who they are. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
some can get. Well, I mean, it's like I said, those big presses, they're Big Four, Big Five, but they all have like this massive list of imprints that handle certain things
yeah.
and certain genres and stuff, and that could be good for a small press if they get picked
Hmm.
up, depending on what kind of deal they can get, because it's like, do you still want to keep your identity as the press that you made? You're obviously going to have to change some to be on a bigger level and make money for this other press, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's change, like you said, the like what Charles Darwin said, you got to, those who respond to change is inevitable. It's going to
Yeah.
happen. So
Right.
yeah, you're just going to figure out how to roll with that. But yeah, no, I didn't
Yeah.
hear about them getting picked up. So are they like, they still exist, but they're part of a bigger imprint now, or a bigger company now, or
Yeah. And I can't remember all the Zando acquired them. I'm not that familiar with Zando, but
I'm not
hopefully
either.
they'll stay the same and they'll just have more outreach. But that's one thing, like going back to REM, like that's one thing that's cool about the small university presses, the indie press, is that you have creative control. And so for me, like my main purpose is to I want to that control is important to me, and so for me it's a great fit, because I do like having that control. And also on the flip side, of course, I want my work to connect with readers. So I would also be like having the distribution of a larger press would be fantastic in that way. I guess the perfect medium would be to have a little bit of both. Um, but like we were talking about earlier with editing, I loved having the feedback from my editor Kevin McKelvey with Pineville Trace, and having more feedback. It's just going to me, if you're with the right person that understands your work and your intent, it can only make the work better.
Like, understands your work is the important
Yep.
thing. That's the
Yep.
important thing. You don't want someone, like, say if you write horror, you don't want someone who's an editor who doesn't like horror and has no experience with horror editing
Mhm.
your work because they just don't understand. I remember like giving out blur, or if you want people to, like, beta readers, if
Mhm.
you're writing crime and you got somebody who doesn't like that stuff and doesn't understand how that criminal stuff is supposed to work, they're not going to give you good advice, probably. You know, they can give you good structural advice. They can give you, like, you send it to someone who's just going to, like, oh yeah, I'm good with grammar, I can tell you what's wrong and what's not. But
Right.
understanding the work is important.
Definitely.
So we've talked a lot about how writing kind of got started for you. You said Pineville Trace is your first published work, right, as a book,
Yes.
but you've written other books,
Mhm.
right? So
Yes.
kind of, I guess you're going to work on trying to get those out, right? And kind of like, what brought you into the whole longing to write? You said around the age of 19, you were kind of getting into all that. So when
Yeah.
did you realize you really wanted to do this, and how did you pursue that?
So I think I always like making up stories. I would make up stories. When I was a kid, I would make up stories, whether they be funny or serious. I was always making up stories. And I love music. So I started, I learned to play guitar when I was this summer after my senior year. So I tried my hand at writing songs. I wrote poetry when I was younger as well. I'm never, not, I don't feel like that writing poetry is my strength. Even though sometimes the flash fiction form is kind of close to a narrative poem, I kind of feel like when I'm between genres, that's more where my strength lies. But in answer to your question, I loved reading was another thing. I was I read books like I read The Great Gatsby and I loved it. I read The Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne and loved it. I read On the Road when I was young and by Kerouac, and I loved it. And I was just a big reader, and so all that kind of led me to wanting to write my own work. Um, yeah, it's been a long road, and I'm still enjoying it. So, and it's been cool, like like you said, getting this first book out to the world has been really nice. I've gotten a number of stories and essays published, but it's really nice to get a book out to folks, and I'm really proud of Pineville Trace, and it's one that I haven't gotten tired talking about and reading aloud. So, there seems to be folks seem to enjoy it. The folks that like it really like it, and so that's cool to connect with people.
Yeah, I think I wonder, like, anybody who reads a lot, I think at some point, even if they don't pursue it, they always think about, I might want to try writing a book one day. And then,
Yeah,
and then I think a lot of people, they'll sit down and do it, and they'll be like, man, I can't do this. This is just too much. I'm just going to keep reading. Then there's other people who are like, yeah, this is
yeah,
great. So I
yeah,
think that's kind of where it always goes to. Like,
yeah. It's not easy. I mean,
it takes a lot of dedication, a lot of mental stress.
yeah, yeah. I've got this in front of me. This is something that's been important to me. This is framed. My wife, I don't know if this is going to pick up. I don't know if you can see that, but
See a little bit, right? A little every day.
yeah.
I can't see the rest of it. Yeah,
Without hope, without despair. Write a little every day, without hope, without despair. And that's been important to me. Isaac Denison said that, and I believe I came to that through Lee Martin when Lee Martin and I were talking, but I had forgotten that.
Yeah.
I just knew this was important to me. And then at the Books in Progress conference at Carnegie, I met Chris Offutt, and he was there, and he gave a lecture about his writing process. And it'd be amazing if he got it published, because it would be so helpful for people. It's really great. But his main idea, he kind of took this a little bit further. His goal is to write at least 1 minute a day. And so he explained, sometimes it might be like on his notepad on his notes app in his phone at the airport while he's traveling. But by staying in it, his subconscious is staying on the work. He's continually, in that world. And I think that's a great goal. And a lot of times that's my goal. Sometimes write at least 1 minute a day. If I can just do that, that's something. And I love that. I thought that was helpful. It's this is just kind of a little bit off the cuff, but there's an interview with Chris Offutt and Dennis Johnson, Tin House podcast that's fantastic. It's like from 2003. Are we getting Queek back here? She visited.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic. If any of you all are fans of Chris Offutt or Dennis Johnson, it's a great one to listen to. You kind of hear from both of them and get into Dennis Johnson's craft as well.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, like, I never heard that write a minute a day. I think that's a good idea, because because usually if you sit down and you try to write a minute a day, you're going to write more.
Yep.
So you're just telling yourself, I'm going to do this. And so then
Yeah.
something else. So it's all psychologically there. And the more you keep writing, the more you might sit down and be like, damn, I don't know what I'm going to write on my story today. You start writing something, and then holy crap, you come up with stuff you never expected.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. Just kind of staying in it every day. That it's there's something to it. And you're right. It's almost a psychological trick. But on the flip side, if your goal is to write 2 hours every single day, there's a lot of times if you're going to fall short of that, and you're going to beat yourself up, and it's not going to be much fun.
Keep the pressure low.
Yeah.
Keep the pressure low. A lot of people are like 1,000 words a day, 2,000 words a day kind of thing. And I tried that too. And it was like you're talking about. I couldn't. There were days where I was like, I have to do it. And you put that pressure on yourself, and you end up kind of blocking yourself. At least for me, like, and I couldn't think of, like, I have to write this. But then I would just be like, well, I'm just going to write what I can. I started doing that, and then it would turn into like 5,000 words, 6,000 words if I had the time. But if I don't have the time and only write 400, hey, that's something though.
Yeah. And there's times like I'm looking at this this manuscript here of this the working title is To Bury, and this is my 7th book that I've kind of set down. I like to sit a manuscript down and let it be away from me for a few months. So when I come back to it, I'm distanced enough from it. I think I got this idea from Stephen King's book, his memoir, but I see what's really on the page instead of what I intended to put on the page.
Yep.
And so I'm letting it sit. But like the second draft from September 26, 2024 to February 28th, 2025, I worked on the second draft, just going through and polishing and line editing and revising. And so if my goal was 5,000 words a day, I failed on that goal, for 5 months. But there's, that's why I don't think that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, me neither.
There's times you got to polish the work. Just getting the first draft down is just one step. But yeah, what works for me the most. I use a timer, and so I'll set a timer, and my goal is just to write during that time period and focus. And during that time, that's my goal. So whether it's polishing, line editing, first draft, whatever it is, during that time, I'm focused on doing it. And that's my goal. And so this week I'm on there's a spoke with an agent who had some interest in the Antenna novel. and had some really great feedback that I agreed with and had already thought of as well. So I'm working on getting a draft together. And so there's floating cat hair above my head there. I'm working on getting a draft together. So I'm off my day job for the week, and I'm having a writing retreat here at Nonesuch with the cats to get this draft, to get those revisions in place. And so for now, I'm setting a timer like 3 hours a day, because it's a writing retreat, and that's my main goal, is just to spend some time working on it. So that works for me, setting a timer, because you can adjust it to what your needs are at the moment. And if you're focusing on the time for that period, then that's all you need to do,
Yeah, the way you approach writing certainly has to be flexible. I think if you put too many rules, I think that's why people end up with writer's block. They put too many absolutes before them.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, walking away from something for a while, you can come back to it. I wrote something in 2020 called the Devil's Tree, or just called the Devil Tree, and I
like
remember
the title.
yeah, I remember hating it when I was done. It's basically about this boy who wanders into a circle of elder trees in the woods, and they tell him about a prophecy because he's trespassed. So his punishment is he has to go and raise the devil tree, which is this tree that's supposed to come up and stop this prophecy and this thing from spreading across land and killing all the trees. It was just some weird crap I came up with.
Yeah.
And I started writing, and I ended up hating it. And then I found it. And when I went back, and now that I'm revising it and everything, I'm like, this wasn't nearly as bad as I remembered it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's a little more sparse than what I'm used to writing. It's very short for me. It's about 100, and probably it's only about 40,000 words, which is short because my head's full of crap and I just write a bunch of stuff. But it's like, it's a lot better than I remembered it. So I think walking away and coming back is really smart.
Yeah. I love those, like 40,000 words. I love those short novels. Like, of course, I wrote a novella, so it's probably obvious.
Right.
But I love
it's
novellas.
Form. It certainly is.
I love that form, and those short novels, like a lot of Dennis Johnson's later works, like The Name of the.
Oh, the thing for. There we go. Oh.
Am I cutting out?
Yeah, a little bit, but you're back now.
Okay. Back. Okay.
Okay.
So anyways, I love that short novel form. That sounds like an awesome concept, by the way, Jacob. But to your point, I love that Devil Tree I love your synopsis there you gave. That sounds like a great story. But to your point though, like this Isaac Dennison quote that I have here on my desk, little every day, without hope, without despair. It kind of like encourages you not to judge, because you need to do the work, whether you think it's the greatest thing in the world on your first draft or just a total piece of crap. It doesn't really matter. Do the work. You need to get some distance and go back later, and be objective about it. But it's not helpful to have despair or overwhelming joy about with the quality you're evaluating what you're working. You have to just do the work first and do the best work that you can create.
Get the work out there. If there's any good in it, you can fix it later and bring it all out. And, and just don't hold yourself to ridiculous standards. I think it's like, I don't take myself seriously. Like I'll take myself seriously in the sense that if I write something, I want it to be the best I can make it. But like the content, I'll just, like this last book I just put out, Hearts in the Hourglass, it's full of a bunch of absurdity and just stupid stuff, just weird what ifs I had. But I ended up really pulling it all together, and there's a lot more serious writing, but there's still a lot of that ridiculousness junked in. So it's like, I don't consider myself, I think it's smart that people just don't have a vision of yourself as a writer and just write and be whatever you are.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. And you've got to just fully be yourself. That's it. Yeah.
Don't just try to write to please a certain group. Just write what you write and find your group,
Yep. So. Absolutely. And that's my thing too. People say, like, what's your ideal reader? Like, I'm my ideal reader.
Yep.
I write the stuff I like to read. And other people that have similar taste to me, might like it, but that's okay. I'm not trying to please everybody,
That's it, man. I think that's it. Well, we are almost out of time. Is there anything else you'd like to plug real quick? We already talked a lot about Pineville.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, Jacob, first of all, thanks for having me. And appreciate Nightmare Press. The Jimmy Wonderful book, I still want to read. I love
Oh,
that
it's
character
fantastic.
name.
You would like Coyote. He's a great writer, and you all kind of have similar. I was actually going to mention him because of something
Yeah,
he said earlier, but I didn't. I was like, nah,
yeah.
I mention him all the time, and I don't want to beat it to death. But he's a great writer.
Yeah, no, I love. I want to read his book. I just saw your post about that, but no. So folks that are in the Lexington area, I'm having a reading with Rick Childers at the Beaumont Center uh, uh, branch of Lexington Public Library on April 13th. That's a Sunday in the afternoon. So and then we have another one coming up in Bowling Green in Western Kentucky with Tom Hunley, and that's April 24th. So if you go to, and also I'm excited about this. The Lexington Public Library has a cat themed book club called Check Me Out, MEOWT, which I
Cool.
love the name.
That's
And they
awesome.
meet in the Lexington Humane Society cat room. And so they chose the book for April, and I get to go hang out with them in the cat room at the Humane Society. So I'm looking forward to that. But I would just say, go to wesblake.com and go to events if you're interested. Come out and get a book signed. Rick Childers is a fantastic writer. He's also a debut writer, and his book Turkey Foot is fantastic. Tom Hunley is a great poet and writer. And so, anyways, check out wesblake.com. Events are there. If you go to subscribe, I have a newsletter. And if you're a Dennis Johnson fan, I'm currently writing an essay about when he came to our workshop in Lisbon. It was really influential for me. So if you go to wesblake.com and then click on subscribe tab there, you can get that sent to you as well. But yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, Jake. It's been good talking with you again.
All right. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you. Y'all take care.
You too.